Pedestrian boundaries is difficult, and it should be because it touches not only our facilities, but more important, the lives, memories, and futures of our students, staff, and families. To me, schools are not just the bricks and the walls of a building, they're the people that bring them to life. The people in our schools are the heart of our community and the foundation of lifelong learning. I understand this process brings a range of emotions from anger to frustration to grief and worry about the future. Tonight, as we listen to each other and move forward together in the process, I ask that we approach it both with sensitivity and unity. I believe we are unified in our common purpose to provide the best opportunities for every child in our district, yet we also know the realities that brought us to this place. Financial constraints and budgetary concerns, changing enrollment patterns, a national and local decline in birth rate, and the need to ensure that every student has access to high-quality learning experiences. These challenges require us to think critically and make hard decisions that, while painful, aim to serve our students' long-term interests. The strength of our district has always been its people, and we will need that strength now more than ever. Let us remember that even in disagreement, we are unified by our care of our students and our shared commitment to their success. My hope is tonight we can listen to one another with open hearts and minds, weigh all perspectives, and work together to make decisions that will help our district emerge stronger and more resilient. While we may not all agree on the outcome, we can choose to move forward in a way that reflects the values and dignities of this amazing community. I look forward to tonight's thoughtful comments and questions. Dr. Hendrickson.
Good evening. My name is, I don't know if I'm being too loud. Frank Hendrickson. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. And I've been working with Dr. Pletnick, our CFO, and a committee of individuals, of parents, teachers, community members for the last 8 months. We began back in last March, April time to begin this exploratory research on looking at our enrollment trends and the impact of those enrollment trends on our financials. So tonight we're going to give you a very brief overview of the presentation that was given to the board on December 3rd. I do encourage all of you to go to our district website. Right on the front page there's an icon that says school closures. You will have all of our presentations from December 3rd. You will have an FAQ that answers a number of questions that we continuously add on. Information from those that focus group, the meetings, and the agendas from all of those meetings of what led us here tonight. So I encourage you, if you have not looked at that information, please do that. After I conclude, we will have an opportunity to, for those of you that signed up to speak, to come up to the microphone to my right, your left. Based on the number of speakers we have, we're giving every individual 1 minute. If you are combining minutes with other people, some people may get more minutes if someone is allotting their minutes. After that, we have your question cards. We will go through those question cards. At that point, any questions that are similar questions, what we'll do is we'll just kind of answer those as one, so we're not repeating questions. If there's any questions we're not able to answer, what we'll do is we'll make sure we get back to you with that answer to that. Or afterwards, if I don't answer your question correctly, or if I miss something on it, feel free to come see me afterwards. As I mentioned, this is a very abbreviated presentation, but it began with looking at our enrollment. We know that, as Mr. Dolezal said, for the last several years and the next 10 years in the future from our demographer, we see a continuing trend of loss in enrollment. Enrollment equals dollars. That's how we are funded by the state of Arizona. Each year we graduate about 400 seniors. We only bring in about 200 students in the kindergarten level. And so knowing that we're having this trend and that's impacting our financials, it was determined to look at, are we utilizing our facilities correctly? Are we efficiently utilizing our facilities? And so this first graph I'm showing you is just showing you a couple different things. The top line is our per pupil expenditure. And you see that those numbers are all over the board. And that's, again, indication that at some sites, at every site we have fixed costs. We have administrative costs, we have front office costs, custodial, cafeteria, we have fixed costs regardless if there's 1 student or 900 students. And so a smaller school does have a greater impact on that. Some of those dollars are impacted when they have specialty programs. So if you have a self-contained special education program, you get additional dollars. So those dollars move when you go to other schools, but they'll move on. The next line looks at our student capacity. So that was from our facility management group that came in and did an audit of all of our buildings, the number of essential seats in those buildings at an 80% threshold, and the number of seats of students that we could fit within our buildings. And those are those numbers there. That third row is going to be our current usage, or our current capacity. So as you look across, we have a 65%, 25%, 46, 53, 45%. And so I'm not in the business I didn't get an education for business, but when you look at it as a business mindset, when you're running a facility at half capacity, you have fixed costs you have to pay for. There's a need to look at, do we combine schools, do we close schools as a result of that? And so overall, our average capacity of all of our schools combined is 47%. So we're only filling half of our schools, yet each one of those schools we have fixed costs we have to pay for regardless of the size. With our recommendations, I'm going over here in a little bit, by reducing to just 3 schools, moving to that K-5 grade band, moving our 6th graders up to Sonoran Trails, it brings us from a 47% to a 60% capacity. Still room for growth, doesn't increase or overcrowd our schools, and still in a good position. That next line says with 12.5% loss, takes us down to a 52% capacity. As we did the research and we looked at, there is an impact, there's an unfortunate impact that when you close a school, some students and some families will choose to leave as opposed to going to the new school they're going to. And so we are kind of pretty conservative with that in looking at how other districts have done that. And depicting a 12.5% loss, we think it's going to be a lot less than that, but also we want to, again, be conservative with that and not overexpend our resources there. So again, regardless if we do have a loss or don't have a loss, we would only have 3 elementary schools at a 60% capacity, which paints the picture of an inefficiency of how we're utilizing our dollars here. Next part is looking at why certain schools were chosen. So there was a number of factors that we looked at. We try to look at every angle of the school because we know there's a risk, regardless of the school you close, there is a risk to it. And so we looked at what programs or what things can come to another school, what thing would lose, what schools, if we close them, would lose students, what schools are gaining students. And so those are the different factors that were looked at. Because doesn't matter what school we close, we know it's going to be a risk to us. How do we minimize that risk? So the big thing we looked at is geography. Geography, location is a major factor. If you have a school that's on the border to another district, where that family can easily choose to leave the district to go to that school that's in PV or Deer Valley next door, there's a higher risk of losing those students. There's a higher gain in those schools that are on boundaries because families will choose to come quickly over that boundary to choose your school. And so that was one thing that we looked at. We looked at specialty programs. Are there things at that school that families are choosing that school because of that specialty program, whether it be a performing arts, a foreign language, horsemanship, or STEAM? And then we looked at what is the replicability of that program. Is that program, do we have that ability to embrace that program at other sites, or are there core things about that program of where it's at that you can't necessarily replicate it, or you can't split that program up? Non-resident open enrollment, those are the number of students that we get from outside the district that are choosing our school. And so as you can see, it varies depending on the school, but some schools have quite high, some schools have a quite low open enrollment. Every student that we get in is roughly $5,500 that comes to us. Again, we're not bringing these students in because we want the money, it's great to have, but they're coming to us for our programs, and we run a risk of losing those students by closing. And then obviously current enrollment we look at, and then finally the cost covered by the school facilities division. So those percentages tell the story of how that school is covered should there be major damage or need for major repairs. So if a roof goes out, if an AC unit goes out, if you need new flooring because it's aged out, the school facilities division from the State Department, that's how they will fund our school for those repairs. So Black Mountain, DSA, Desert Willow are funded at 100%. They will cover the entire cost of that repair. Horseshoe Trails is only funded at 68%. Lone Mountain here is only funded at 37%. The reason that percentage is there is it is based off how the state built that school. So what they do is they come in, they say, you need a school that houses an additional 300 students, so we'll pay for a school of 300. The district chose to pay for a school of 800. So that additional cost to build a bigger school essentially is why they're only covering 30% of Lone Mountain as opposed to the full 100%. That number will never change. If Lone Mountain is the only school left in the district and all the kids come here, that number does not go up to 100. It sticks at 37%. So based on all the research that our committee did for that our 8-month period and looking at, number one, we identified there was a need to close schools for efficiencies, for cost savings, to bring in more revenue. We then determined that there's capacity to close 2 schools. And then based on all of those factors, the 2 schools that were recommended from that committee were Lone Mountain and Desert Sun Academy. And so what it would look like moving forward, the recommendation to the governing board is Black Mountain will remain as a K-5 school. Again, our 6th graders are going up to Sonoran Trails. Dams is our old middle school that was closed 12 plus years ago. Was it right here? 2008-09 is when Dams was closed. That school was essentially abandoned. We're going to recommend submitting that for demolition to the School Facilities Division. It's beyond repair that we cannot use that as a revenue stream. DSA will be closed, rezoning all of those students will be rezoned to Horseshoe Trails. Lone Mountain closing and rezoning to Black Mountain and Desert Willow. I'll show you the boundary map and why that decision was made there. Horseshoe Trails remain as a K-5 school, adding the PALS program that's currently housed here at Lone Mountain, moving those classrooms over to Horseshoe Trails, and then Sonoran Trails returning to a K-8 model, or 6-8 model, sorry. So as we look at the zoning, this is going to be the district zoning, and so Lone Mountain, as I mentioned, will be split between Black Mountain and Desert Willow. Cave Creek Road is a natural boundary where you're not splitting a neighborhood up, and there's pretty much equal number of students that reside on both sides of that boundary. So that was the natural break of where we saw that we could zone a school without overtaxing one school over another. So as you can see there, any students that are west of Cave Creek Road would be zoned for Desert Willow. Any students east of Cave Creek Road would be zoned for Black Mountain Elementary. From here, I'm going to turn it over to our CFO, Dr. Pletnick, who will talk about the financial implications.
I'm going to quickly be covering some of the financial pieces that come into play with making this decision. I probably don't have to tell the room that Cave Creek financially has been a difficult place for not just this year, but for many years. And we can go and date back towards the closing of Desert Arroyo, and we can look at the finances of the district, and then we can see a declining enrollment, and see the impact that it's having on the district with programs and cuts in programs and some of the Band-Aids that have been attempted to try to get us in a good financial position. When we look at closing the 2 schools, now this is an estimate, and again, the estimates were based off of other districts closing. 12.5% loss would be taken into account with our weighted ADM, or how we're funded by the state for students. But also, what we wanted to make sure we did is we used numbers from our fiscal year 24, because those are known numbers. Currently this year, our expenses are still fluctuating based upon student need. So this gives us a good idea, based upon historical spending, how much we would approximately save. So I covered this in the board meeting, but the weighted ADM takes into account student grades, student needs. So it's not just enrollment. So if you notice, it's 2284 our current, and that was as of November 11th, but that doesn't mean we have 2,284 students at the K-6 level. That means the state gives us credit for 2,284 students. And then we have our base level funding from state, which this year is $5,013. This changes year to year, so we will not know what next year's funding is, because it's based upon the state's budget. So once the state passes the budget downtown, then we'll know what we're funded at per student. And then TI is our Teacher Experience Index. So we get a little bonus because we have experienced teachers in this district, so it gives us a little bump up in the amount we receive from the state. And when I say receive from the state, the amount they allow us to spend, because all of our money is based upon local taxes. And if you've heard other presentations or board presentations, you know our district raises more than enough money to cover what we're allowed to by the state for education. And then this year, for example, we're shipping $12.5 million downtown for the general fund because we're only allowed to keep so much. Now, you can see what currently, if we take our K-6, how much money we are bringing in from that local tax base and how much we have in the expenditures. When we take all of our elementary schools, we have about $70,000 to spare. Now, that $70,000 has to cover all district costs, maintenance, it goes towards food service, transportation, and then with the closures, we can see estimated, and again, very conservative, taking in a 12.5% loss, and then taking a conservative view on how much money we would save in each of our spending areas, it would increase to approximately $838,000. Now, the other big piece to understand here is if we take no action. And again, the first line we see the $70,000, but if we have a 1% decrease in enrollment, so 1% in that weighted ADM, all of a sudden that K-6 number goes into the negative. So now we have a negative amount of money coming in from our K-6 level. Now, how have we been able to have our money for transportation, have our money for maintenance, have money for various instructional needs that we have? Well, our secondary level, they have a much bigger surplus in respect to funds coming in between their expenditures and what revenue we do have coming in from that local tax base. So that's how we've been kind of able to balance. But there's also been other things that this district has done for a number of different years. And the one thing is, we also receive funding for what used to be called capital, and now it's district additional assistance from the state. So we receive a set dollar amount from the state for each student. Now, that set dollar amount, what we can do is use it for capital needs. Some examples of capital needs, easy examples would be like Chromebooks, improving our infrastructure, improving our technology for the district. But what we've been doing as a district, and looking back, again, for the past at least 5 years, is we've been taking a majority of that capital money and moving it to cover our maintenance operation expenses. So that means what we've been doing is we have been running in a negative amount in our capital, meaning we are spending more on all of those capital items than we have coming in. Now, how did we get away with that? Is because in certain years, we didn't spend as much in our maintenance and operations or our capital, so we built a reserve. And what's happened now is that reserve has been dwindling lower and lower and lower, to the point where moving that money from capital over to M&O will result in us not being able to cover some of our bills. So that's a Band-Aid that's been going on for a while, and that's how we've been able to kind of spend what amounts to about $32 million in maintenance operations over the past 5 years. So each year, $32 million. So we're at the point where we have declining enrollment, which means we have less dollars coming in from our enrollment. And we've been trying to decrease expenses in various ways, but we're at the point where we're running out of that carry forward money to cover that difference. And so that's what leads us to needing to take additional action.
Thank you. So as I call your name, we're gonna move on to the portion of our speakers again. I encourage you all to go to our district website for the full presentation. Tonight is about listening to our families, listening to our students and teachers. Governing board is here, cabinet is here as well, and so to make it a true listening session. So as I call your name, the microphone will be over here to my right. Each speaker will have 1 minute unless they are, their time was given from another speaker. So our first speaker will be James Carrick, and James will have 5 minutes.
I probably won't take all 5 minutes. Do I need to turn this on or can you hear me? All right. I've been in this district my entire life. I went as a student, so I've been around. I understand the situation the district's in and how long it's been going on and the need for something to be done. I want to focus on 3 points. I've sent a lot of emails out with other points. A lot of people have talked to me and asked me to send out emails on behalf of them with different comments or questions or concerns. So while I'm speaking today, I just want to focus on 3 different things. One is the community impact and student disruption. Okay? Closing Lone Mountain Elementary School will divide our students amongst 4 schools. I know up there we said 2, but realistically we have a portion of our students going to Horseshoe Trails, a portion going to Desert Willow, a portion going to Black Mountain, and a portion going to Sonoran Trails. So you're taking a community and dividing it amongst 4 different schools. We have a plan for Desert Sun to move their entire population to 1 school, 2 if you include the middle school. In theory, keeping that intact, that community intact. Where's the equity in Lone Mountain students, 4 Lone Mountain students, and separating them amongst so many schools? When there's another option where you could bring the entire population of Desert Willow to this site intact, keeping their community together, and keeping our community together. So that's my first point. Second point is the just simple advantages of this campus compared to some of the other campuses. You're sitting in our gym and our cafeteria. We have a really great sized gym for an elementary school. If you've been on some of the other campuses, their gyms are far smaller, we'll go with different in their shapes. Plus our facilities in general, we have a lot of field space to use for things like our field day events, just for classes. If classes want to take their kids outside, do different events out there, they have the room to do it even if we're utilizing that space. Again, I've been on some other campuses at lunchtime and there isn't that space to have lunch happening, recess happening, and a class happening. There's just not space for it. So we really do have a great facility. What some people have said is a negative about this campus being centrally located and out of the way, I consider an incredible advantage. We are out of the way. We are down a street that has plenty of extra space on it. We're not disrupting major thoroughfares. We're not disrupting Low Mountain Road, Cave Creek Road, Desert Willow, when school gets in or out. While we have a lot of space, we also have parking. No one had an issue with parking, I'm sure, tonight. I've been to meetings at other campuses where I'll give Desert Sun, Desert Willow, if you've ever been there when there's an event going on, there is no parking. You're parking in the communities, you're parking at the church, you're parking somewhere else. So those are things that I consider advantages of this campus, not negatives that some people see. Additionally, have we looked at, and I guess this is a question now, have we actually looked at what is the benefit of moving Desert Willow here as opposed to closing Lone Mountain? In keeping that school's community intact. And if we have, what are the hindrances? What are the negatives of that I'm not seeing? Finally, the fairness of staffing and retention. This is a big one for a lot of us. And I'll read this because I get kind of emotional about this because it's upsetting to me to some extent. Many steps in the process seem to be improvised rather than thoroughly planned before making such a monumental decision. And that's not a knock on anyone. This is not something anyone has a rule book for or anything like that. But we seem to be reacting based on the premise that, okay, we have to close schools and we'll figure out what we're going to do about it afterwards. Some of the key decisions that I see concerns with is how is the staff going to be given opportunities to vie for desired positions from the schools that get closed? So how are we going to have the opportunity to find positions at the other campuses? And how is that equitable or going to be equitably dispersed amongst the different schools? And the staffs. And I'm not talking just teachers. I'm talking your front office staff, your kitchen staff, everyone. needs to have that opportunity. It's sad when I hear other teachers, oh, it sucks to be you guys, you're going to be closed, what are you going to do for a job next year? And that's coming around from a lot of other teachers in the district, which means they have no fear for their jobs. They have no concerns about it because I got my position, you get whatever's left. Really? Is that my time, really? All right.
Our next speaker will be Shauna Shavaria. She will have 1 minute.
Hi, I'm a PALS mom. I've been the room mom for PALS. I actually left at the beginning of this year to do ESA, to homeschool my 3 children that are here. ESA is a joke. We don't have the capacity to fund the 80,000 contracts. I had to pay 11,000 in debt just to cover the 4 months. We came back, we've been welcomed. My son has a community beyond anything. I can call Jessica in the front office. I can have them do anything with my child. I go to Fry's, I see people in the community that know my child that I have no idea who they are because this community, you guys preach people. I know you're doing everything you can. You move the PALS, you lose all trust. These kids have a safety net here. My son had to go to the front office because he's been gone. There was another kid who was afraid to come back to school. They used my child to bring him in. The community here is unbelievable. I've been to Paradise Valley, I've been to San Diego School District. You will never find a better community. Move the other school here, fix it.
Our next speaker will be Chris Herrera, and he will have 1 minute.
James? James, you got it? You can donate if you have to, right, before it's coming.
You're donating now, or?
I just have a few seconds. I think, obviously, the financial situation is difficult, but not a single word, a single slide has been said about the performance of our school and the ratings that we've been getting. So you mentioned that we're not in the business of making money. Of course, that's true. We need to keep in mind the end goal, which is the future, and it's quite literally the kids, and they have an amazing school here. So, James, if you run up here in 35 seconds. But please keep that in mind. I'm so nervous. 20 seconds. This is my first time being a parent of kids at school. I know what it's like to be in school. I loved it. I can see the joy, not only in my kids, but in their friends, and the kids I don't know. They love coming here. They love the staff, the teachers, the custodians, everybody.
Our next speaker will be Jeffrey Smith, and he will have 1 minute.
My name is Jeffrey Smith, and I'm from Lone Mountain Elementary School, and I'm in 2nd grade. You cannot close Lone Mountain Elementary School. It's the best school I've ever been to. It has everything I need. Like I got friends, food, sports, field, nice teachers. I hope you don't close Lone Mountain. Thanks for listening.
Hey, Jeffrey, you did an amazing job, and I know your mom and your teachers were proud of you. Aaron Enos is next, and Aaron will have 2 minutes.
I would like to know how we're going to handle the fact that, as you said, Desert Sun will be allocated to go to Horseshoe Trails. And as Coach Carrick mentioned, I am a mother who does not want to send my child to Desert Willow, and that is my home school. So how are we going to handle the fact that that I am not the only parent that feels this way, and we will want to go to Horseshoe Trails where they have an established community, where we know friends are there. And what are you going to do with the class sizes? Currently, my child is in Jeffrey's class. We have 24 kids. His teacher is incredible. I am the room mom of that classroom. It is organized. The children are learning. What are we going to do when class sizes get extremely large? There is no place to put these kids if we have an influx of students, and it puts the teachers in a position where they will not be able to effectively teach our children. In addition, I've worked in the corporate world, and as we know, when there are layoffs, it comes from the top. So as we look at the administration, are we going to understand what kind of effects are going to happen in your area? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like we're closing schools, and I hope that we're going to retain our teachers, but are we going to look at the redundancies in the administration and see if we can cut some of those roles? I also feel like as we talk about marketing, and as I mentioned, I have a very long experience with marketing, word of mouth only works when you have something to shout about. And the thing that made Lone Mountain special was our STEAM program. And if you want to use word of mouth as a marketing tactic, you need to ensure that you bring the magic in each part of our schools. So I would love to understand, if enrollment is down, how do you plan on enticing parents to come to our schools? Because it's not going to be class sizes. And if you're cutting all of these costs, what is the motivation for someone to come to our district? Thank you for your time, and I expect these questions to be answered tonight.
Our next speaker will be Angie Jensen, and we'll have 2 minutes.
Hello, members of the board. My name's Angie Jensen, and I'm a parent of 2 children that currently attend Lone Mountain Elementary. Although we live in Paradise Valley School District, I made the choice to open enroll my children at Lone Mountain due to that STEAM specialty Aaron was speaking of, the enrichment programs, and the quality of this campus and the teachers here tonight. Given the enrollment numbers of the district, I do understand that a change is necessary. However, the recommendation to close this school, along with a number of other high-risk changes in a very short order, is a mistake. Given that enrollment and financial considerations are at the heart of these decisions, I can't understand why Lone Mountain was chosen for closure over Desert Willow. Per the focus group's own data, Lone Mountain has higher enrollment and was more financially sound by over $200,000 when compared to Desert Willow. Additionally, like we spoke, Lone Mountain's proximity to the middle and the high schools is a tremendous benefit to this community, making it an integral part of the district's educational flow. It's still puzzling that Lone Mountain's central location was listed as a reason to close when it's clearly a benefit for the families and the children of this district. The whole process seems very rushed, and to push through with these closures without having any concrete phase 2 plans, it's risky. What happens if the analysis for phase 2 shows that closing a different school would have been a clearly better decision and a better financial choice? Is the district really willing to take on the risk that you're going to have to live with the poor decision, or even worse, have to ask families to relocate a second time? Altogether, this recommendation just doesn't add up. I heard the comments that closing just one school and reevaluating would lead to further community stress. However, rushing through this decision will damage the trust that this community has. I urge the board to reject this proposal and at the very least, allow more time for another decision.
Our next speaker will be James Kai. James, you'll have 13 minutes.
Good evening, members of the cabinet, or to our attending and this community. My name is James Kai. I'm the father of 4 children. Wow, I didn't get emotional. We have a senior named London who's in 12th grade. I have a first grader named Emery who's in first grade, and I have another freshman there at Cactus Shadows and a 6th grader. So we live in Monte Vista, the neighborhood across the street from this campus. I've been part of this community for over 24 years. Over 24 years ago, this is where my wife and I bought our first home in Tatum Highlands and have raised our 4 children. Excuse me. Really didn't think I'd get there. We love this community. My wife Lisa attended Cactus Shadows High School and CCUSD. Initially, I was engaged because of the process, because of my kids attending Lone Mountain Elementary School and the close proximity to the school to our home. As I've gotten more involved, I spent countless, I would say almost hundreds of hours trying to learn and understand the different aspects of this difficult decision. And I understand it's a difficult decision. I've tried to research, get data to provide a reasonable information and not just make an emotional plea. My family, along with me, has invested countless hours of communication with I've communicated with district staff, teachers, administrators, board members, neighbors, lobbyists, advocates, SFB members, and parents. So the North Star that we're talking about, what is the best for our students, right? That's what we've been looking at in this presentation. What's best for all students? And what will result in financial stability for CCUSD? When evaluating these major influences, there's lots of things that go into this. So I'm going to also go to the 4 items that have been mentioned as well. Geographic location, open enrollment for non-residents, specialty programs, and financial situations. Those of you who have spoken here can speak for more than 12, 13 minutes, I guess. But I want to let you know a couple things. Here's two ideas, and one has been spoken already. One idea would be to move forward because there's a financial need that we've got. We look at the numbers, and Mr. Plotnick, I appreciate your time today and speaking through this stuff as well. But when we look at the savings that's going on with Lone Mountain, we're talking about a 13% savings per the estimates right now, assuming that there's not additional loss. And I would utilize the geographic location, again, as a positive situation for Lone Mountain. And it's unique. I get it. Horseshoe Trails, they're close to PB School District, so you get kids there. Black Mountain's close to Deer Valley, you get kids there. And so you're getting an open enrollment, but what's not happening is a central location for families within Cave Creek to be able to come to. The unique culture is a testament to the geographic. We don't have a specialty program at this point. I would say our specialty program is the geographic location and the culture of this community. We had Mandarin. We lost 75 families, I think, approximately, is what I've been quoted, to that program. But Lone Mountain continues to attract more people. There's a culture there. There's something intrinsic. It's not financial. It's not just quantitative. It's qualitative. And I think it's oftentimes hard to see that. So we're talking about financial things, but we need to take that into consideration. When you look at, let me back up. So the ideas as far as that would be go. If you wanted to move forward and you needed to, you move forward with DSA. It's a 25% return on your closure with those numbers. It's the lowest enrollment. That's kind of, it makes sense to be able to do that. Part of this situation is our financial stability that we're talking about. When we're making these decisions, there's risk to make a decision, there's risk to not make a decision. And I understand the desire because of the slow loss of DSA by ripping the Band-Aid and moving forward. But there's risk. So is the risk to rip the Band-Aid off that we don't know of families, again, that aren't tied to a specific program, but are tied to a school and a culture? Are we going to lose more families there? Or should we take the time to really evaluate what makes sense with our schools? Understand capacity, understand the demographics that are going that way as well. And the reason I also go into financial stability is the fact that we've talked about the BRG. So I have spent countless hours talking to Ms. Catherine Robinson, who's in charge of capital resources at the BRG. And she's helped me understand, I get it. We don't have the ability to change our BRG funding, Building Renewal Grant, which is the 37% that we're talking about versus the 100% that DWES and DSA has. But what's, I think, missing is one of the items on our, I think it's slide 28, or where it talks about the reasons why Lone Mountain should be closed, was one is a central location for district repurposing. Okay, so if we're going to use it for the district, and then 37% not having that. If we use it for the district, that 37% is still the same. The liability to the district is exactly the same if we're using it for that. If it's not used for a district purpose, we get no dollars from the BRG. I talked to Kevin McCarthy, who is president of Arizona Tax. It's a lobbying organization. It's in charge of schools, and they're looking at education. He said, I would be very cautious of making a financial decision based on using the BRG as a reason in the SFD funds. And here's the reason, and Ms. Catherine Robinson said the same thing. The BRG currently has $185 million of unfunded grants. So I'm trying to get the additional information on what that percentage is, but if you think about it, we know that right now legislators are not putting money into our public school education. We can all agree to that. But then when we look at that $185 million, so we're assuming, hey, that 100%, are we going to get those dollars for the school to fix it? I would say the likelihood is not a guarantee. We're making a best guess in a grant. Because here's the other thing. Ms. Robinson also said, when they're looking at schools, they look at age of schools, location. Our schools are new. Our schools there's a lot of things that are going on. So there's schools and a criteria that are probably going to rank higher than where we're at. So, and then from a financial stability standpoint, I really question, what are we going to do with these campuses? So my background, and you said it enough, I deal with real estate. I've worked with a family that's been in business for about 100 years that was originally farming. And I dealt with a lot of family arguments and a lot of divisive decisions and hard things. The one thing that's served us well is coming together with solutions. And so I believe that we can come together with solutions given the time that makes sense with the community. My fear is, again, ripping the Band-Aid off, we're going to create problems and we're going to be stuck in that decision. Desert Willow Elementary School has a different purpose as a real estate piece of property. I had a site plan done by an engineer who works for D.R. Horton. There's 48 units that potentially could be placed on that with affordable homes. So if we look at our community, Shea Homes is building 50 new units about. The price of those homes are around $2.2 million. So you look at where Lone Mountain is at, and if you were to try to get homes put in here, is that an affordable home? I think most of us would agree. The homes to the north are large lots. You're not going to get the density that you need, and density helps affordability. It also makes that property valuable to a home builder. So one concern I've heard is we don't want to sell it because of the fact that charter schools or private schools may come and buy it. So if that's the case, which I do understand, that could be a big problem and only exacerbate our issues. If we have a buyer that is willing to pay more, which usually home builders will pay a good amount. We were in the process of selling 268 lots to Ashton Woods. I'm in the process of selling 45 lots to Mattamy Homes. I have a neighbor who works for a home builder who's been with Mattamy, Pulte, and I don't say this to brag. What I say is our experience and the community that we have is well versed in these types of situations, and given the time, we can come up with solutions. Desert Willow, senior care, that's another potential use. There's a new facility. We have aging population here, right? So we need to take the time. But if we decide to shut it down without really looking at what our options are, we're locked into this situation. I have heard I've heard suggestions, and I know there's a phase 2 that we're talking about doing. But I think it's important that we, hand in hand, come up with some solutions. Because currently, if we shut down Desert Sun, that's one campus. Desert Arroyo, that's a second campus. Black Mountain, the old Black Mountain Elementary is a third campus that's not being fully utilized. We have assets that we need to figure out. And I know there's been discussions about Desert Arroyo and trying to get demolition. I talked to SFB again. There's a building of useful life program that they're trying to create. There's misinterpretation of it. The building of useful life project means that they will take you out of the capacity calculations for your school. For those who, what that means is when a district is being evaluated, we have to be over capacity to be able to get you capital projects. So what that does is, for schools, they use the example of Chino High School, some schools that were built in the 60s and 70s. They have a program where those buildings are inhabitable, they can't be used anymore, so they're going to pull it out and then try to apply for capital funds to move forward. Okay, 3 minutes. So what I'm saying is there is not a solution for Desert Arroyo for demolition. We need to come up with it. I just feel like we're asking our board to make a decision too rapidly without knowing what the results will be if we don't have a plan. So I understand the financial stability. What I'm asking is for some compromise to be able to do that. And I know that there's been a lot of time and effort, and I appreciate administration, I appreciate the teachers, and I appreciate the family members that were part of it. But I would say that we need to get a diverse group of people that can bring experience to help in that situation, of educators, business people, marketers. You're hearing what we have within the community. So the second solution, again, and you've heard it, is the closure of Desert Willow. If you're going to shut down 2 schools, and then bring the students here. I've talked about culture. We don't need to split up our kids. We need to bring and come together. So I'm going to quote Mr. McCarthy again. He said the best way and the most efficient way to be able to run a school is to have the most butts in seats. This is the largest campus that we have for our elementary schools by capacity as well as by size. So if we can bring them all together, we're going to get efficiencies from operation. Anyone in business can understand that. The other important thing is no business, no school is surviving by cutting costs and reducing expenses. It's a measure to help you kind of reevaluate. You need to grow. We need to grow our top line revenue. So for a school, what does that look like? We need to have programs that attract. Bringing Desert Willow in and our other kids allow us to have maybe the possibility, if there's efficiency, I've not known the numbers, but to have a full STEAM program. My kids, those of you know London, or Asher and Emory that have been here, they have been part of both. Well, Emory hasn't. Asher's been part of both, and so has Lucy Kai. And they have told me, Dad, it's so much better. Like, let's create something unique versus going and having our other teachers already that are burdened to have to do that curriculum. So I think there's a lot of opportunities when we come together. I understand Desert Willow and the question of open enrollment. I would suggest, and there's a bajillion questions coming your way, but where does that open enrollment driving from? Is it Spanish immersion? So I'm going to go back to the Mandarin program. We lost 75 families. I know some of those families are driving now to Anthem in the Deer Valley School District to do that. We're asking Desert Willow families to drive another mile and a half to come. So if it's open enrollment, that's the drive, if it's open enrollment and keeping it, I think we can find a compromise by having the Desert Willow school kids come and get Spanish immersion. The last thing I've heard from a community school standpoint, Desert Willow is our community school. If it's a true community school, why are we reducing the English-only side of that program? It's 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. If it was, you would have full English as well. It's a Spanish immersion program. I'd love to see the data. That's from my outside side and a non-educated standpoint. Okay, let me see if I can hit the last other ones here. DSA. Anyways, last thing, the communities come together. In 2 days, we've had 75 respondents from a form that we put out to try to gather data to really figure out what's going on and then also use the momentum. Look at all these families here. We need a bond, we need an override, and we need door knockers. That's how you pass an election. And we need to do that while this next election. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Our next speaker will be Nicole, I apologize for last name, Fioramont. Tiamonte. I apologize. Nicole, you will have 4 minutes.
Good evening, Cabinet and board members. My name is Nicole Fioramont, and I'm a proud Lone Mountain 4th grade teacher, as well as a parent of 3 children who attend Lone Mountain. I'm speaking today to the board members present in hopes that you will strongly reconsider the recommendation that has been made to close Lone Mountain. I know that changes need to be made. However, I believe the choice of Lone Mountain as one of the schools to close is a clear mistake. It is perplexing to me that Lone Mountain was chosen primarily because it has one of the higher enrollments in the district. Just this week, we had 7 new enrollments. Not to mention that it is the second most profitable elementary school. If the driving force for these school closures is the financial implications, why are we keeping Desert Willow, who is costing the district $7,000 to operate, and closing Lone Mountain, who is generating $200,000 a year? Shouldn't we be capitalizing on the strength of Lone Mountain rather than dismantling one of the most successful schools? Lone Mountain could absorb 100% of the students at Desert Willow and allowing their community to stay intact, as well as bring over the immersion program. Like I said, the same cannot be said if we close Lone Mountain. Friends and families will be divided amongst multiple schools, and you will be disrupting the PALS program who thrive on structure and stability. Another reason we need to pause and reevaluate is the complete lack of justification for Lone Mountain. The facilities committee only listed 3 reasons, one being completely asinine in that Lone Mountain is centrally located. Every elementary school is 10 minutes from each other at most. Not to mention that aside from Horseshoe Trails, Lone Mountain is the closest to both the middle school and high school, making it more appealing to parents who have students in the upper schools. This shouldn't even be listed as a reason. Another factor that was not clarified is that Lone Mountain has one of the highest numbers of in-district student variance, which means that the families are choosing our school over their zone schools. Furthermore, with such a huge decision, why were more factors and steps included in the process, such as campus walkthroughs to assess classrooms, overflow parking, new structures, space for extracurriculars, all things Lone Mountain has that I can't say that other schools do. Along with this, why weren't parents with financial and business backgrounds, like James Kai, asked to partake in the facilities committee to get a high level of competency to weigh in on what is truly best financially? Most people didn't even have a clue this was on the table. These choices seem rushed in hopes to make some quick, big financial gain. But what does Phase 2 look like? What is the plan for these closed campuses? Will they still cost the district to run if they're empty? And what if a charter school comes in and takes over Lone Mountain campus? Now you are losing enrollment and setting back the district even more. Board members, you have listed on the website that your #1 commitment is to keep the students at the forefront of your decision making. Choosing to dismantle a school that is thriving and having to relocate students to multiple campuses and uprooting a special needs program goes against that norm. If you are truly considering the students, you will keep the 3 largest, newer, and profitable campuses open and cause the least amount of disruption. I know you are in a difficult position, but if you want to regain the trust of the community, it is the board's responsibility to understand that it is more important to make the right decision, even if that means we have to start over or do an incremental approach with one school, than a rash decision that can completely set back the district. I deeply respect and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Carrie Barrett. Carrie, you will have 6 minutes.
I won't need 6 minutes, but Mr. Kai, if you want 2 of mine. Okay, my name is Carrie Barrett. I'm a 2nd grade teacher at Lone Mountain. I've seen many changes over the past 21 years in CCUSD. I've had 5 superintendents, 8 principals, and too many staff changes to count. Through the years, I could have transferred to any other elementary school in the district or switched districts completely, but have made the choice to remain at Lone Mountain. I understand that changes need to be made, but there are many reasons that I feel closing Lone Mountain is the wrong decision and is not what is best for all kids. These proposed changes have affected our families, staff, and students since the beginning of the school year. There have been so many rumors going around, and never once was there any communication from the district to dispel these rumors and clear up any misinformation. The first time our staff had a visit from the cabinet was on Monday, December 2nd. You can understand why we believe that there has not been full transparency in the process from the very beginning. I believe that transparency is key to building trust and fostering a productive and cohesive team. When we're all kept informed, it helps everyone understand the direction we're heading and work towards shared goals. It's left many of us uncertain about our jobs, and it's causing confusion among our staff. When important decisions are made without clear communication, it can cause unnecessary stress and make it harder for us to stay aligned and motivated. I have strong concerns for our students and teachers that would be moved to Desert Willow. The number of students moving doesn't warrant one teacher at each grade level and would cause there to be multi-age classrooms, which has only recently been phased out in K-3 at Desert Willow. Multi-age classrooms were also done in the past at Black Mountain, and the practice was also stopped there. There are significant challenges like differentiating instruction, to meet the needs of all the students at a wide variety of levels, teacher workload, social dynamics, and assessment. These factors can make multi-age classrooms less effective for certain student populations, especially when resources are limited or teachers are not adequately supported. Teachers that would be moved to Desert Willow would face the daunting task of teaching multiple grade levels with very little team support and a very clear lack of curriculum materials. Is this what is best for kids? Will this help the district retain highly qualified, experienced teachers? A more stable and less disruptive option for the stability of our community would be for Lone Mountain to remain open and for Desert Willow to be moved to the Lone Mountain campus. This would create a very unique culture and be beneficial to all students. It would add more students to an already strong community to create a wonderful learning opportunity for all. The Spanish immersion teachers would have the benefit of having the 2 English-only teachers to collaborate with on a daily basis and vice versa. Lone Mountain is the elementary school with the highest capacity, and it makes more sense to add 2 programs together rather than dispersing Lone Mountain to 3 different schools across the district. Our teachers have no faith that the district will do what is right for the teachers at our campus. Teachers from other schools are not affected and will keep their same jobs, where we are being penalized for our school closing and moving into open positions around the district. I know that there's no such thing as seniority anymore, but there has to be a system that respects the dedication and experience of our teachers. It has been said that closing Lone Mountain and DSA would only provide a 1% pay increase for 1 year for the teachers. How will this help retain qualified, experienced teachers? How will this attract new teachers to our district? I ask the Cabinet and Board to be open-minded to suggestions and ideas that have been given for a more equitable solution to an enormous problem. I ask that the Cabinet be brave enough to admit that maybe alternative solutions could be both for kids and help our district get to a financially viable status. It has been said by Superintendent Dolezal that we need to do this right. If this is the case, then I beg you all to listen to all of the incredible speakers, families, and staff that are the heart of Lone Mountain. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Natalie May. Natalie, you'll have 7 minutes.
Hello everyone, my name is Natalie May, and I am a Lone Mountain teacher and parent of 3 CCUSD success stories. I want to welcome our board members to our amazing school. I greatly appreciate your time and consideration and know that you have a very difficult decision ahead of you. Since I have already addressed the cabinet with many of my concerns, I'm thankful for this opportunity to address our board members present tonight. Since our district frames our decision-making around the essential goals of doing what is best for kids and establishing financially responsible schools, that will be the framework for which I speak to today. Starting with the facilities focus group, well, it definitely seemed focused right from the beginning. In speaking with representatives from the committee, these meetings seemed to zero in on Desert Sun Academy and Lone Mountain almost immediately. While many of the meeting's agendas and materials are not available to the public, it seemed as though the cabinet members leading this group were presenting material that fit the narrative that Desert Sun and Lone Mountain should be the schools that are closed, with very minimal consideration for alternative scenarios. Desert Sun did not create much surprise, as this campus has been discussed for years as possibly closing due to declining enrollment. Lone Mountain seemed to come out of nowhere. We've never been in the bottom 2 for enrollment. We've never been a B school. We have one of the newest campuses with the highest capacity, and we're about to sit next to a brand new park. It was very confusing, and quite honestly, still is. With a decision that affects so many families and staff members, there should have been a lot more scenarios discussed, as well as on-site evaluations as to the campus itself, vacant classrooms, parking and traffic flow, and the overall condition of the school. When I asked the cabinet members if this was done, they were unable to verify that this process happened at all, and I know for sure it did not take place at LMES. This seems like a major misstep when deciding to close a school. Drawing lines on a map based on geographical location is one thing, but actually assessing the usability and readiness for learning is a completely different and, quite frankly, more important part of a process, especially when all of our schools are so close together. In addition, the Facilities Committee was also presented with information that shows that neither Desert Sun nor Desert Willow has the enrollment to cover their operating costs. I know in the board meeting, Mr. Pletnick kind of brushed over that question by stating that the program of Spanish immersion needs to be considered as an offset to the cost deficit. But at the end of the day, the enrollment doesn't cover the operations costs, Spanish immersion or not. This information that was originally not presented to the board has now been widely circulated in the community, raising more questions about the proposal that's being made and the lack of transparency. The data is simple. Lone Mountain yields the district the second highest surplus of funds, and Desert Willow and Desert Sun cost the district money to keep open. The fact that this wasn't deemed an important part of the big picture originally blows my mind and is creating a distrust of our leadership among staff and families. I am not a finance expert, but if I owned 5 small businesses and 3 were profitable and 2 were consistently in the red each year, I'm quite certain I wouldn't close the doors of my second most profitable location in hopes that some of those loyal customers might start shopping at one of my failing stores. Additionally, in the last couple of years, the district cabinet had concluded that having 1 non-immersion class per grade level is not what's best for kids and also not financially responsible. The projected numbers Lone Mountain's non-immersion students would bring to Desert Willow would not be high enough to even justify 1 classroom per grade level. This would lead to extremely small class sizes or, even worse, multi-age classrooms, which were both things that the committee listed as trying to eliminate. When I asked our cabinet this very question, they also had no validating response and even acknowledged in front of our staff that Desert Willow would likely be a continued concern with enrollment and running a financially right-side-up campus, while failing to mention at all that the campus already costs more to run than enrollment is covering. How can we possibly pass this off as financially responsible or child-focused? Alternatively, as it's been said, Lone Mountain could absorb the entire Spanish immersion program on our campus. Lone Mountain is large enough with the capacity to move every single student and grade level teacher from that program to our school. Families would not be separated and the students would move to a bigger and newer campus that could provide more community events and after-school activities. This alternative would still yield financial gains for the district while keeping both school communities intact, as opposed to dismantling our families between 3 campuses. This alternative would also allow for the future evaluation of the Spanish immersion program in the event we would need to phase it out due to enrollment or staffing challenges. Our district would also be less likely to lose large quantities of students because they're committed to the Spanish immersion program and would follow it just a few minutes away to Lone Mountain. To me, this is a no-brainer and the obvious route to preserve our district's enrollment, communities, and financial integrity. Believe me, I mean no disrespect to Desert Willow. I'm in no way advocating that we close more schools. But if this is the hand we are dealt, we need to choose the options that are best for the future of this district and the students we serve. I understand that the cabinet is backed into a corner, or the cabinet has backed the governing board into a corner. You were given one choice, with limited options to decide or make changes to the plan ahead. But feeling pressured into making a wrong decision because you don't have time to evaluate the options is certainly no reason to move ahead either. The board has the responsibility to determine if what is being presented is really the best option for kids and the future of our district, and there is simply no angle of closing Lone Mountain that makes sense from a logistic, financial, or child-focused perspective. Our school community has certainly lost some faith in some of the decision-making of our district leaders, and we're placing our hopes and future in your hands. I do not envy your position, but I do value your record of objective thinking and decision-making, and I am hopeful that you will do what's right for this loyal and amazing community.
Our next speaker is going to be Jessica Morgan. Jessica, you will have 3 minutes.
Jessica Morgan, and I've been the registrar at Lone Mountain for 6 years. I have some numbers I'd like to share with you on our current enrollment as of today. 44 kindergartners, 36% are zoned for LMES, 48% other CCUSD elementaries, and 14% out of district. 53 first graders, 43% are zoned for LMES, 50% for other CCUS elementaries, and 7% for out of district. 45 second graders, 47% are zoned for LMES, 40% for other CCUSD elementaries, and 13% for out of district. 59 third graders, 59% are zoned for LMES, 34% other CCUSD elementaries, and 7% out of district. 49 fourth graders, 56% are zoned for LMES, 30% for other CCUSD elementaries, and 14% out of district. My data presented tonight is only for K through 4, as I was unable to pull data for 5th through 6th since Power School doesn't show their designation anymore. On average, the LMES student body makes up 49% of our students in boundaries, 40% on variance from other CCUSD schools, and 11% out of district. That means 51% of our schools are here because their parents chose our school over schools they were zoned for. There's been an argument that one of the reasons LMES should be closed is because of the amount of students enrolled at LMES who are zoned for other schools in our district, making it easy to have those students return to their home schools. However, this argument neglects the fact that this high percentage of parents chose not to go to their home school and instead chose to bring their students to LMES. If LMES ends up being closed, these parents will be forced to leave a school that they specifically chose to put their students in and return to the schools that they chose not to attend. I would also like to point out that tonight, the slide mentioned the presented current usage and enrollment numbers. They're not correct. That's just this week alone, I have enrolled 7 students. In closing, I understand our district is in need of change, but my question is, there has to be another option that would be less disruptive to all of our CCUSD families. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker will be Kelly Hendry. Kelly, you will have 2 minutes.
Strangely, for those who know me, I don't like public speaking. Hi, as everybody else, I'm here to ask for you to take a better look at what should be the second school that is closed along with DSA. Why split a school's population when the entire Desert Willow population could be moved to Lone Mountain? Why move a vulnerable special education population, split boundaries, and classmates when Desert Willow and its immersion program can be moved here? Excuse me. I hear the percent of SFB, but there's so much more Lone Mountain has to offer. It's newer, larger capacity, the setup, the gym, the cafeteria size, the fields with the lights, the enrichment and evening programs that are established like the karate class, the lacrosse, youth falcon football and cheer that use the facilities in the evening to do the lighting. The parking that Lone Mountain provides and allows for a car line, additional event parking, not disturbing entire neighborhoods, or idling on busy Cave Creek Road with additional cars during drop-off and pickup. I am not exactly sure how or what this would look like, but please consider requesting an appropriate comparison of Desert Willow and Lone Mountain. Even if it is stated that we will close 2 schools, close one now and make it known a second will absolutely close the following year if you feel that a true comparison cannot be completed in a timely manner at this point. This is not because I work here. I also live within CCUSD. I am concerned with the amount of people who potentially will not enroll in Desert Willow, leave the district, or crowd Horseshoe Trails. I have heard the statements, we will not be going to Desert Willow. These are from current Lone Mountain Zone families. Plus, one of your own slides in your presentation for closure shows 40 families zoned for Desert Willow came to Lone Mountain on a variance in the 23-24 school year. They chose to come to Lone Mountain. I bet that number's higher this year. People have said they will leave. Do you want to call their bluff?
Our next speaker will be Ben Petra. Then you'll have 1 minute.
Hello, thank you. My name is Ben Petru. I am a father of 2 students here. I'm zoned for Desert Willow and I won't go there. We specifically chose this school because of the community esteem program, and at the time Mandarin, which was cut. But if we are rezoned, we're not gonna go back to Desert Willow. We would leave, most likely. We don't want to overcrowd Horseshoe Trails. So I had a couple of things I wanted to talk about, which people have already mentioned multiple times, so it's just reiterating. But the idea that location was the main factor, one of the main factors for closing this school is ridiculous, because every school is within 10 minutes of each other. It's not like you have to drive an hour to go to a different school. You say that enrollment trends and financial reasons were the big ones. The enrollment trend for LMS is going up. Desert Willow is going down. We're bringing in money. Desert Willow is costing money. I don't understand why we would not bring in all of Desert Willow to one location, and instead your guys' idea is let's split up this school into multiple schools instead. If we want to keep the kids together, I hate that sound.
Our next speaker will be Rebecca, I'm not sure if it's Gilligar again.
Yeah, don't you know Gilligan's Island?
You'll have 1 minute.
Take time.
Hi. I will never leave Lone Mountain Elementary School as long as it's open. It is an amazing school, and I want to say thank you to our teachers that stayed, despite the fact that the board has not supported them, despite the fact that this has not been transparent, and despite the fact that they're paid $10,000 to $15,000 less a year. These teachers stay for us and stay for our students, so I would never leave them. However, I would be zoned for Desert Willow. I will not go to Desert Willow. I ran into multiple parents on school break who said they're ripping off the Band-Aid and going to Paradise Valley because they're sick of this, you know what. I tend to agree with that. If you want to rip off the Band-Aid, I would say we might as well go to PD because they value their teachers. And why would these teachers go to another school where we have not showed value, where we have not showed transparency? And I would also like to thank you for your current eye contact. The last time I spoke in front of you, I was appalled that so many adults did not make eye contact and listen to the people who are speaking, especially our teachers.
Our next speaker will be Carrie McCullough. Carrie, you will have 5 minutes.
Hello, members of the Cabinet, the Governing Board, and our wonderful community. Thank you for taking the time to allow the community to speak on this important matter. I recognize and appreciate the hours of dedication the Facilities Committee has put into the proposal, and I believe it was thorough and well presented. While I'm already shared my thoughts with many of you via email and conversations, I would like to offer a few additional points for consideration. As someone who has been a staff member of Desert Willow, Desert Sun, and Lone Mountain, and has overseen all of the elementary schools. Every campus in our district is home to committed staff, outstanding programs, and incredibly supportive families. However, it's clear that to remain financially responsible, we do need to make changes. While DSA is an exceptional school, it seems logical for the entire campus to move to Horseshoe Trails, given that DSA is the smallest population. This would provide an opportunity for both schools to rebrand, not Desert Sun moving to Horseshoe Trails, but to rebrand the school so both schools can combine and create new traditions. I understand the committee's recommendation to close Lone Mountain. It's a decision based on proximity, the fact that it's only covered 37% of repairs, and the new park being developed next door, among other factors, might be a consideration. However, there are several key elements that were not fully considered in the proposal. One of the most important is the unique culture at Lone Mountain. Despite the high turnover of leadership since Mrs. Schaefer's retirement, the school has remained resilient. The community continues to move forward, and the academic rigor and culture remains strong. The school's foundation, built on acceptance, empathy, and strong character, unites the staff, students, and families. It's difficult to fully articulate, but the community feels this, and others recognize it too. For example, last year, members of the Maricopa County Superintendent's Teacher Advisory Team visited LMES not once, but twice to tour the school because it recognized the unique nature of the school. In total, they visited 30 schools in the county, yet they returned to Lone Mountain twice. Also, former Governor Ducey visited Lone Mountain years ago, acknowledging that there's something special about the school. I believe a big part of that is the culture that comes from the PALS program, which I personally started at Desert Willow many years ago. When I was moved to Lone Mountain, I initially was very hesitant. However, Dr. Miller pushed me, and because of that, I am thrilled with the acceptance and foundation based here, allowing the program to grow and continue for over 2 decades. Teachers and families are made aware and recognize from the start that Lone Mountain has a diverse population and everyone is accepted and welcomed. I have attempted to recreate that same environment at Desert Sun years ago, and it's a wonderful school, but it simply cannot be replicated. The same person, myself, starting the program at 3 different schools, and Lone Mountain has been the one that survived because of that culture. When people talk about CCUSD schools, they always mention Horseshoe Trails, Black Mountain, and Lone Mountain. They do recognize that we have a great Spanish immersion program, but the name at Desert Willow doesn't come up in that conversation. I believe the district could create a much stronger, more vibrant school community by combining Lone Mountain and Desert Willow to form a new exceptional school. Lone Mountain is centrally located, easily accessible, a larger layout, and a welcoming atmosphere. By relocating the PALS program to Horseshoe Trails and dividing the current LMES campus into 2 other campuses, we would be risking the destruction of a community that functions like a well-oiled machine. Instead of separating schools, please consider merging them, keeping the best traditions of each, starting new traditions, and creating something even better. Though we have a surplus of buildings due to declining enrollment, it's vital that we maintain and strengthen our current communities. Let's work together to build something better by keeping our current communities united. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker will be Julie Harris. Julie, you will have 2 minutes.
Can I give minutes to someone else?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much for allowing me to continue to rant on. I apologize for some of the things. So one item I did want to mention that I had done was for Desert Willow and Elementary School, and we talked a little bit about it, but with the traffic concerns. So I had Southwest Traffic Engineering. I know the gentleman there that has done that, and there's a stacking issue. So the way these schools were built at that time, they're not stacked well enough for the amount of cars that typically you drop off in general, even Lone Mountain isn't. But the issue with Desert Willow and the amount of kids that are going over there, he says you need about 60, in addition to the 500-foot drop-off, you need 1,656 feet of storage space. So when that storage space comes out of that driveway, you're now into the cross traffic of Desert Willow Parkway. So that left out and right is a traffic issue. Whereas Lone Mountain, we do have stacking issues, but I believe it's over a half a mile or nearly a mile. And the other benefit from a traffic standpoint is that you don't have that cross traffic coming, so that left is pretty consistent and seamless and flow. So there is a safety concern, I think that needs to go into that as well. I talked about the revenue. This, one other parent had talked in our survey that we had done, and I appreciate their heart and desire because of the 1% raise that we're trying to do for our parents and the lack of people thinking we can't get a bond or an override done. Of the parents that responded or families that responded, there were, I think, nearly 50 people that had said they would dedicate time. You've got a community here, and just a raise of hands, who would donate time to knock on doors for an override or a bond that's in here as well? So right now, you've got a captive audience, and there's some energy, which doesn't always stay, so I get it as well. But trying to maneuver onto that is important. But the plan was, we'd ask people if they would donate money to give the teachers money directly. And there were quite a few respondents. I would say about 90% would donate, and I'm happy to share that information. My last thing is, if you haven't had a chance to fill out that Google form that's gone around, please see me or my wife or Chrissy afterwards, and this is just a QR code, you can scan it. I just want to collect the data that we have as well. So thank you.
And our last speaker will be Anna Boone. Anna, you will have 2 minutes.
Good evening. I genuinely appreciate the fiscal situation the district is in and the necessity to act. However, to say that our school is more than a building is an understatement. My husband and I have 4 children currently enrolled here at Lone Mountain Elementary, and I look around at the staff and the teachers and the families who made an indelible difference in the lives of my children. And our schools are more than buildings. They are communities where students form lifelong friendships and where families connect. Closing this school and splitting our students splits our communities, despite this belief that Cave Creek Road makes a difference in this community. It will disrupt the fabric that supports our children's learning and emotional well-being. For many children, attending school with familiar faces gives them a sense of security and belonging. Have we considered the psychological toll of tearing this community apart? Specifically for Lone Mountain, where the proposal separates our community between 3 schools. Strong student relationships lead to stronger academic performance, and both with our students, but also with our extraordinary high-quality teachers and faculty. I urge this administration and the board to consider moving Desert Willow to Lone Mountain to maintain their community, which is just as important as ours, and reducing this concern for the totality of our Cave Creek community. Fragmenting these bonds is a risk I don't think is worth taking. Thank you.
Before we move on to the questions, thank you all that have chosen to spoke. Thank you that have emailed us, emailed the board, because truly it's that engagement from you guys and hearing your voice, and the board is here to hear your voice today. So we're going to take about a 2-minute break. We're going to get our questions in order, and then we're going to start our questions here. So what we've done is we've kind of given questions to who is best to kind of answer it, but we may chime in, so we're just kind of work our way down. But I'll start with the first question. The question is, what is the process to reconsider closing Desert Willow in lieu of Lone Mountain? Statistics appear to support this. So there's a statutory requirement when it comes to closing a school, and so that requirement has to do with providing 10-day notification to that school that there is going to be a public forum to consider that. So that has to be done 10 days. The public forum then has to be held in 10 days prior to a vote that is taken. So the quickest something could happen would be 20 days, if you will, but that's not considering research within it. So that's the process that we legally have to go through. It can't just be, hey, the board decides let's do this school instead, because we have to do the same sort of forum with Desert Willow if that's the consideration there. So.
Okay, I'm going to answer a couple of questions.
So what is the process to reconsider closing Desert Willow in lieu of Lone Mountain? So if the board wanted to go forward with possibly closing Desert Willow, we would have to provide notice to Desert Willow 10 days before a meeting like this. We would have to hold a public forum, and then 10 days, at least 10 days in between the public forum and actual board votes. So if the board, if that was the decision that we wanted to go in that direction. Does that help?
The question is, will you consider doing it, or is that off the table? Not if you decide to do it, will you consider that?
So nothing is finalized, so part of this process and these listening groups and the same listening session that will occur on Monday is to hear all this feedback, have conversation as a cabinet, get feedback from the governing board. Ultimately, Mr. Dolezal will make a recommendation to the governing board. The governing board can follow that recommendation, change. They can't necessarily say on the dais, switch to a new school, but they can table something, if you will. Yeah.
Okay, I have multiple questions that revolve around what are the plans for using money saved and closing the 2 schools? And to answer that, number one, and the specific responses on the card were teacher salaries, specials, yes, all the above. So we would be looking at, number one, teacher salaries. We would want to look at not only teachers, but all of our staff, and looking at their salaries and compensation. A number of speakers stated that neighboring districts are certainly paying more than we are paying, and we really do want to address that concern. So that part of the money would be used for that. So we have the initial projections of the savings, but the next plan would be in December, after students do reports, we would evaluate where we are with cost savings, and then we would evaluate from that point. The other piece, and this kind of moves into Dr. Jensen's role, is we would be looking at our programming. We would be looking at the different aspects of our district that we can expand. We would be looking at pieces that we can improve, like I talked about earlier, technology and so forth. So we would be looking at essentially providing that stability so we can see those increases in teacher salaries, programming, as well as student resources.
Okay, I have 2 questions asking if we will survey the families to gauge their interest to stay or leave the district to help us understand the risk. That's been considered and dismissed because people are naturally going to say that they would leave the district if we're going to close their school. So it's not more information we need. We know that this is not a popular decision for anybody, and so that we don't need a survey to tell us that. We know that people are going to be upset if we close anybody's school. No matter where we go, we hear that. So we don't need more data to tell us that.
Question about, have you consulted with the City of Phoenix Parks and Recreation team about the feasibility of repurposing Lone Mountain into a community center? Sorry about that. I have reached out. We are making contact with the city planner, both of the City of Phoenix and the City of Scottsdale, based ultimately, again, going into that phase 2 process in terms of looking at after cost-cutting measures, and here, how are we going to increase revenue? What can we potentially do with these, with whatever properties we have at that point in time to move forward? So again, involving those cities is definitely part of the plan, but in terms of the Parks and Recreation Department specifically, no. It's been the city planners that we're looking at for phase 2.
Next few questions all kind of revolve around teacher contracts and knowing what site they would be at for their contract. So our plan for staffing will go once the governing board makes a decision of what schools are they going to close, if they're going to close schools, is then have an opportunity for priority open enrollment for our students. Staffing that I place is based off where student enrollments are. So if 400 first graders end up at Horseshoe Trails, I will place 4 teachers for that site and vice versa wherever it looks like. So that's how I do staffing. So we would have a timeline for a priority open enrollment for families that if they're choosing a different school. That will then develop my staffing models. And then we will be surveying teachers to find out their interest, grade level, or school site as well. So we'll have a process with that and process for placing the teachers and whatnot. Our hope is that when a teacher receives a contract, they will have an indication of what site they will be at what grade they will be at, That is never guaranteed regardless, but we do not want to do a bait and switch where we're in place here and we completely change it, because if families all of a sudden move and I no longer need a teacher at a grade level, I can't afford to keep a teacher at a grade level, but we would offer those contracts with a good indication of the grade and the site that they would be at. Other questions, just to clarify for families, we do have a liquidated damages clause if a teacher breaks their contract. Depending on when they break their contract, they have to pay a fee for that. So the question is, would that fee be waived for this year? And so we've already been in conversation about delaying that fee. And so at some point, we do need teachers to have a contract. We need to have a guarantee that that teacher is returning. However, we would eliminate the short term when you would have to give it back. It would be an extended period if that teacher let us know, let's say by June 1st. Typically it's 15 days they have to let us know. But if we extend that out, that way if they do decide to break their contract, they can break their contract without penalty. So we would want to do our best to honor that. If I have a teacher break their contract the first day of school, that's not doing right by kids, and I wouldn't necessarily waive that liquidated damages. So.
I'm so sorry for interrupting. I just wanted clarification. Did you say if there's 400 students, you would have 4 teachers?
Sorry, 100 students, I put 4 teachers.
Okay, there's a big problem.
Yeah. So what we do is we basically look at number of kids at that grade level divided by the board adopted policy when it comes to class size, and that's how many teachers go. So just because there's 2 teachers at the site and more kids coming doesn't mean there's only going to be 2 teachers.
Regarding those 4 teachers that are at Trail, is there I think that there's a perception currently that they would have some sort of seniority position. So if we could clarify if it's open, for those positions.
Absolutely. I think there's several questions here that regard placement. So yeah, we'll get to that. So if I don't, James, make sure you hold me accountable at the end. Okay.
Okay, I have multiple questions on what are the projected costs for maintaining the campuses if they are closed. And that you did see on the presentation slide, but what we did is when we looked at the savings in talking with Paradise Valley as well as other districts that did Glendale who closed campuses, we estimated that maintenance and operations would only save 70% of the overall cost. So when we're looking at that, we factored into that savings percentage from each campus that 70% would be saved because we knew there would still be a need to maintain those facilities and for our maintenance staff to come through, still clean, make sure all the pipes are in good working order. So that is where we built that into the projections. And a question that kind of goes along with that is how do you engage outside counsel to review land ownership and zoning for campuses? And are there opportunities or constraints that need to be accounted for? The answer to that is yes. There's been multiple conversations going on. Although we don't have specific campuses at this point that will be for sure closing. Again, that decision hasn't been made. We have talked to multiple real estate firms as well as firms that deal with school repurposing and have dealt with other district repurposing. We've also contacted different entities such as EVIT and what are the opportunities for such as EVIT satellite campus. Are there those opportunities for an EVIT satellite campus? So we've entered those discussions. We've also talked to some of our special education providers. Right now, one thing in the budget, and when I presented the AFR in October, we saw that in fiscal year 24, we spent over $700,000 on contracted special education teachers. And then we've also seen an increase in special education tuition costs that we're paying to outside organizations. And when we're talking about tuition with the transportation costs, we are in the millions on that. So what can we do with some of these campuses, especially looking at if campuses are closing, repurposing, what can we do for some of our special education programs to become more efficient within the district and to provide the services to our students? So there is that talk, even though we do talk about phase 2, projecting forward, there are those talks about, okay, we do need to have initial conversations on what the plans for these campuses are. Because again, the purpose is not for these buildings to stay empty. The purpose is not for these buildings to be like Desert Arroyo and essentially rot into the ground. That I'm hoping was a lesson that was learned in this district, that that's not the proper way to move forward.
Will 6th graders have the same middle school experience as 7th and 8th graders, i.e. electives, class switching, sports, etc.? So, should the board choose to send 6th grade to 7th, or to the middle school, to Sonoran Trails, we are discussing some ideas just so that we're prepared, because we would need to make some quick switches in terms of getting students registered, as well as other things. So our first meeting on Wednesday, yes, Wednesday, and overwhelmingly in that particular group, people are wanting it to look like 7th and 8th grade, however, with a softer 6th grade touch is what I'll call it. So slightly separated, however, still getting opportunities for sports, for choice in their electives, so they don't all get art, music, and PE. We also have a survey out right now. If you're a 5th grade parent, you received the survey, and thank you to the 133 people who have already filled it out. And so we're reviewing that data to make sure that we meet our community needs to the extent possible with our staffing and space allowable.
There's a question referencing our qualifications to shut down schools. I want to make it clear we don't shut down schools. Ultimately, we make recommendations based on research, what data we can collect, gathering information from groups like our focus group, and then we make recommendations, and ultimately the board would vote and shut down schools.
So I had a couple of questions on feeling this kind of a rush process that will affect, why was the decision being rushed? Why was such a monumental change for our district? Why is the committee only formed in August? So to reiterate, the committee was formed back in April, so we've been meeting since last April, and where we had our demographer come in, we had the facilities management group that looked at our facilities and did a study of all of our facilities and the lifespan of our facilities. So that was the process. And so part of when you do a process, and Mr. Dolezal can speak to it, when Desert Arroyo took 2 years to close, and the strain and the stress it creates with the community when you have a lingering decision going on, and kind of taking best practices from what we've seen from other districts, making sure we did a thorough data dive into everything, look at everything that we could, including getting feedback from our community. And so we felt that 8 months provided us enough opportunity to gather all that. So the other questions had to do, has the district considered logistics of or community benefits of consolidating Desert Willow into Lone Mountain? I had 2 questions related to that. So the way the focus group worked is after we kind of got the research, we got information from the demographer, we saw that there's a declining in enrollment, that there was a need to close schools. We looked at each school, the unique properties of the school, programming, open enrollment, trends for future enrollment, things like that, potential new buildings in those communities. The focus group was given, asked to develop scenarios of what would it look like if you closed school A, and they did this on their own. You close school A, move that school to this, and this is what would be, you move school B to this. And so the committee did kind of tabletop work where they kind of worked out different scenarios, and through all of that process and conversation, looking at all that factors, that's when we kind of came to the final conclusion as a focus group of what we initially recommended to the board for Desert Sun and Lone Mountain.
Just to clarify, so they met, you met in April, May, June, July, August, September, all the way to December, so it was 8 months?
So we did not meet throughout the summer, but we met, we had our first 2 initial meetings, and then we reconvened in August, yes. Yeah.
So like 4. Not 8, so we'll be up on that one.
So the next questions I have are dealing with Section Y is LMES closing instead of Desert Willow. When LMES enrollment is higher, it brings in more money and is newer. And if LMES is the second highest enrollment, and it brings in over 200,000 a year, what is it costing the district? Lowest enrollment costing the district at least 7,000 to operate. Why was LMES chosen? Okay, so I think those are kind of multi-pronged on that one. But from the financial side, what I want to discuss too is the money piece. And yes, we looked at M&O, and when we looked at that, the M&O budget and how much money was brought in M&O versus how much money was in expenditures, you did see the difference between the two. The one thing we also need to look at are there are different pots of money besides M&O that do fund the school. And so when you looked at that one slide, when you saw the per student, the $9,000 per student, if LMES was just that $200,000 in the positive and just, it would be lower than that $9,000 number. What we need to look at too are other revenue sources that go into Lone Mountain Elementary School. So we do have other funds. We do have IDA money that comes into the school. We do have classroom site fund, additional classroom site fund money that comes into Lone Mountain as well. And that's how you saw that number of 9,000 per student. So if you look at the charts from the initial board presentation, you'll notice like in the 1,000 function, you'll see that on the slide that presents the M&O savings, it was $1.6 million in M&O expenditures. But when we look at the total expenditures in that 1,000 or the instruction function, on the overall cost, it's $2.39 million. And so the difference in that comes from other funding sources. So even though M&O, we're looking at, you do see M&O expenditure, you see M&O revenue, and then you see the expenditures, and then you see that number. We also have to look at other funding that we have to use to fund this school. And so that's when you see those two slides, you see the differences. And so when we look at that $200,000, that is part of the puzzle. And that M&O piece is part of the puzzle. But we also have to look at the other resources that are moved to that. And that answer kind of goes along with, have you calculated the profitability of each campus in the same manner? You calculated the cost? Yes. So we used the same thing. One of those slides in the initial presentation had all of the funds that go towards the expenditures. And then you also saw, again, just the M&O expenditures on those slides. So you can see, based upon the expenditures, how much we bring in from the state. We really do as a district depend on other funding sources. And other funding sources come from, again, these other pots of money that are given to us. One is an additional pot of money called the Classroom Site Fund, IDEA grant, which is special ed funding, which that comes from the federal government. Title I money, that also comes from the federal government. So even though we receive funding from the state, we do also receive funding from the federal government for certain programs as well.
Okay, what is being done to try to attract students to CCUSD, and with all the closures and cost cuts there's something cut off, but I'll go with what is being done to try to attract students to CCUSD. So ultimately, we have the highest qualified teachers. We have the highest test scores in Maricopa County. Our product of education speaks for itself. In order to maintain the highest qualified teachers and the best teachers, we need to be able to be a little bit more competitive with our salaries. We know that if we don't close schools, we cannot ever give raises. In fact, we will probably be increasing class sizes because at that point we are, we would be negative however many thousand, all of that. So The $700,000 savings that we get is per year. We need a large chunk of that to give the 1% raise to base per year. Teachers in CCFD have not seen a raise to the base salary in at least 8-9 years. So everything has been a Band-Aid through ESSER funds, through little things that we've gotten. We need to give an actual raise to the salaries, and in order to do that, we need to reduce and become more efficient by closing some campuses. So that's the main thing that we're doing. I could list all the other things. We send out flyers, social media presence, all of that as well. But our main thing is word of mouth and having the best product that we can. We know people leave, we've heard it tonight. They leave and they come back because they know there's nothing better.
Just no offense, 1%, does that mean I'd rather have our school? 1%. I don't need it. I'm not
And I'm going to go on to the next piece that kind of goes along with what that 1% and the yelling with 1% is that $700,000 is kind of, again, a very conservative estimate. So if school closures happen, if efficiencies happen, then we can see greater than that. And as time goes on, improvement programming, again, if enrollment increases, then we would see a greater savings on those pieces. But when we look at that $700,000, again, as efficiencies occur, it could be greater savings. If you talk to PV, they use the same numbers of projections, and in December they have gone beyond those percentage of savings. So in talking with them, and it can actually, again, 700,000 would just be initial estimate.
You said people leave and come back. I did leave, but I only came back to Lone Mountain. People leave, but they only come back to Lone Mountain because the community is. It's not the rest of the school. I'm still for Fortune, and we will not go anywhere else.
When I'm speaking, I'm not talking about just Lone Mountain, I'm talking about the district in general. So they do leave the district in general and they come back in general. I understand that specifically tonight that was the comment, but this is the district in general.
And guys, I started this evening asking for certain decorum in that we're doing our best, we're getting through these questions. If you want to come up and talk to us at the end, we will stay, we will listen, we will talk to you. I know we're angry, I know we're upset, I feel it, it hurts, I know, but I'm going to ask you to please be respectful. What would need to happen for Desert Willow to be considered an option for closure if 2 schools are recommended for closure? The current recommendation from the focus group, and that's in front of the board now, is the current recommendation as we've reviewed. In order for that, the board could direct us to go back. The board could choose we're going to close 1. Between the options that were given tonight, the board could direct us to say we're closing 1, and yes, we're going to close another one, and we want you to do X research, or we want you to look into those things. So ultimately, in terms of the recommendation of the focus group is what has been made in order for Desert Willow, and Dr. Hendrickson talked about it earlier. If that was the direction we were moving, then I would, again, on the 28th, I will bring a final recommendation for the board to consider. What it can include at this moment in time, because of what we've done, are those 3 things: Desert Willow, Lone Mountain, and reconfiguration of 6th grade and moving up to Sonoran Trails. If that was to change, then again, if something was going to be different, that's all that can be a part of. I can't go without the timeline of closing Desert Willow. I can't even make that recommendation because we haven't had the 10 days before Monday the 13th, and then 10 days before the 28th. So in order for that to be considered an option, for 2 schools, one, it has to be my recommendation on the 28th, and then the board could choose to approve that recommendation, approve part of that recommendation, approve none of that recommendation.
So I have a few questions regarding open enrollment and student-teacher ratio. So I've kind of addressed it, but I'm going to make sure I get it fully answered. And so again, parents will be given an opportunity once the board makes a decision. They'll be notified of what their new zone school is, and then there'll be the window for priority open enrollment. So if I believe it's going to be March 7th, I think it's right before spring break, we're going to give families an opportunity, if you want to apply for open enrollment at a different school than you're zoned for, we will guarantee enrollment at that school that you are open enrolling for, as long as you let us know by March 7th. That is when my staffing comes into play, so I know how many students we'll be at. If a family changes their mind and wants to open enroll after March 7th, we simply can't guarantee it because I'm starting the staffing process there. So, and if we have a higher number that go to one school, then a higher number of staffing will follow to that school. As far as student-teacher ratios, if you go into the presentation that was from December 3rd, you can also go on our district website to our governing board policy. Governing board sets policy of what class sizes at every level. Every grade level is slightly different. Smaller class sizes in kindergarten and kind of increases from there. So we stay within those class sizes. If it gets over that number, we provide another teacher that school. So. Then several questions regarding teacher transfers. How are we keeping the most talented teachers? So I'm going to kind of speak about this in twofold. So if we were to RIF teachers, so that RIF is a reduction in force. If we were to say at the end of the day, based on the number of students, we need X amount of teachers, but we have more than that. Teachers have a contract, we have a contract obligation to teachers to renew them. If we have more teachers, a surplus of teachers than we actually need, we would have to initiate a RIF process. Through that RIF process, seniority is illegal in statute to use seniority as a factor in that. So we have to create a rubric that kind of essentially creates a score for every teacher. And then our current process for a teacher transitioning or for a teacher transferring or transfer process. Currently, the transfer process is a teacher would put in for a transfer. Seniority is a factor in that transfer process per our policy. So those are currently our practices in policy. So whatever we do moving forward, we have to follow what's in policy to make it fair and equitable. That being said, I'm meeting with a group of teachers next week, representatives from all of the elementary schools, to review what is our current transfer process. What is our current RIF rubric? What do we want to add to it? What do we want to change to make it fair and equitable moving forward? So whatever the process becomes, we follow that process. One conversation that Dr. Jensen has had with all of our elementary principals is that if we are blending teams at 2 different schools, is that you have to blend them in a way to where it's not a Horseshoe Trails first grade team, a Desert Sun second grade team, a Horseshoe Trails third grade team. And we want to make sure that as we're blending teams and bringing teachers on, we're finding strengths at each grade level. So that's going to be a factor that's taken into consideration as we move people over. So if I did not, any of those teacher questions, if I did not hit them well enough, again, we're going to have that meeting with the teachers next week where we're looking at the transfer process. And we'll make sure that whatever that process is decided, it's a fair and consistent process moving forward.
Just to clarify,
Yeah, Mr. Carrick will be joining us on that committee.
Just to clarify transfer, is that usually an optional opportunity at that point versus a forced?
Yeah, so we have like an optional transfer that teachers put in for every year that they can choose to go to school, but then we have surplus as well. And so typically we don't have any surpluses, so usually it's first in or last in, first out typically, because seniority plays a factor.
This is totally different.
Correct.
Transfer process.
Correct, yeah.
Whatever rules you have there actually can be applicable to this situation.
And that's why the committee's going to be meeting next week. Yeah, thank you.
And what about the principals? Where do they fall in line? 'Cause they're part of our teacher group. We've really enjoyed Mr. Culbertson. He's been phenomenal for us, and I just would be really curious what's in line for him.
Yeah, so teachers have statutory safeguards that administrators and classified staff don't have. So That's why there's very specific process that we have to apply for teachers that are different for our classified. I'm going to start with classified because there's going to be more abundant. And so one of the things that we're doing right now is we're making sure that any openings that will be coming up moving forward, that we're not replacing those positions, because we're going to move teachers or para people, kitchen staff, ECS staff, things like that, and finding places for those people. We have contractors in those positions. We have openings across the board in those positions. However, that's not necessarily going to be a guarantee, but we're going to be making sure that we're filling those people. As far as administrators go, one of the things that Patty is looking at, we have some unfilled positions at the district office. And part of that is, do we continue with those unfilled positions? We will have a surplus of administrators, and that's going to be a decision up to cabinet and the governing board what to do with the surplus of administrators.
The next question, next couple questions deal with, can LMES be changed from 100% coverage instead of 37% coverage? For example, if Desert Willow would close. And just like James talked about Katie down at SFT, in working with her, the coverage percentage will not change. So that coverage percentage with the school facility division is set, so that 37% will stay. Another question is, how does it differ from closing one school to another school as far as LMES would save approximately 650,000? The same assumptions as we look at any school we use the M&O, again, expenditures, where in 1,000, which is instruction, we estimate 14% savings, where in the function 2100, which is instructional supports, we estimate a 14% savings as well. In administration, 95% savings, maintenance and operations, the 70% savings, and I forgot 2200, which is instructional support, of 14% savings. So as we look at every school, as we would look at each and every school, we would apply that same percentage across each and every one of those expenditures in those categories to them. So we look at it in the same way. And that kind of goes along with another question, if we explored, essentially, if we explored the savings, is it using essentially the same formula? And again, yes, it is using that same formula. So we'll calculate that. Yes? Yeah. What, the savings numbers? We have those numbers available, so I can definitely, if you want to email, we can send it to you. All right. What is the current revenue generated by LMS Field, and what would the financial and operational impact on the district be if we're unable to continue generating revenue from this source? I would have to check with Mr. Santina on what specifically LMES Fields are generating. But even with school closure, there would be no reason that we could still not rent those fields. So we could continue renting those fields, so it really would have zero impact on that rental. What it would require is, just like we have staff now that opens and closes facilities for us, that would continue on, so that revenue generated from that would not be impacted.
Okay, how many families left after the elimination of the Mandarin program? Does that situation provide evidence that families are willing to follow a language immersion program if it is moved? Approximately 75, somebody already stated that, and yes, families will follow programs that they find valuable.
I don't know that these are multiple or if they're separate or kind of an ongoing, so why close both? We look at simply a 47% occupancy rate right now in terms of all 5 schools. It's not efficient. We need to become more efficient. We need to cut costs. Running 5 schools at a total occupancy of 47% does not make sense. Closing 1 school does not get us there. So that is why the recommendation from the focus group was 2. Why not move DSA to Lone Mountain? Again, not one of the recommendations because we're looking, again, to cost cuts and save more. Again, looking at that 47% total occupancy, and even closing those 2, getting up to perhaps 60% occupancy at that level. Debated making a comment, and I guess I'm going to, and again, I know this is emotional, and I know this is charged, and I know it's your school, and it does. People have said, does this say something to you about the people that have turned out? Absolutely, 100%. It says a similar thing to the people that turned out last night and who also wanted just to have you come down to Desert Sun. And so there's those pieces that I get. And yes, both last night and tonight speak deeply, I think, to us and to the board about the power of the communities that we have here. And then move to the newest school open, which will have a new park next door. I think we know Desert Willow was 99, 2003 was Lone Mountain, 2006 was Horseshoe Trails. The new park next door did not come into play. Well, I don't want to speak for you, but I don't believe that came into play in terms of a reason to be open or not be open.
I'm going to trade through quite a few here real quick, but will all staff get contracts at the same time? Yes, we'll be issuing all contracts to staff. By statutory law, we can't issue contracts until March 15th, so after March 15th is when contracts will be sent out. How do we know we will have enough qualified teachers? Why would they switch schools? And so every year when contracts come out, prior to contracts come out, teachers do resign. We have natural attrition that occurs every single year. I want to say last year we replaced about 26 elementary teachers, so we do have a natural attrition that occurs, and then that starts the hiring process for my department to find kind of more qualified teachers. What guidance on this issue has the state given, and what guidance council has the board asked for? So the state does not give any guidance as far as if we should close school. As local control, is the board's decision if they decide that they want to close a school or not. And the guidance comes from the focus group, from the demographers report, and the demographers presentation that occurred last year, and all the information we provide. And then the council comes from the community, their feedback, their input for them to ultimately make a decision on what they're going to choose to do. So.
Okay, next question. The budget appears to reflect an increase in bond debt payments. Is this correct? How much debt remains? And is it typical for payments to increase over time? What is the forecast for the cost until full repayment? Could the debt be restructured with or without a vote? Okay. The bond debts, when bonds are issued, and we use Stifel, a company called Stifel, to issue our bonds historically. What happens with that is they do issue those bonds, and when they issue those bonds, very similar to like your mortgage payment, like an amortization table, that's developed. So what that is repayments over a period of time. And so our bonds have 15-year repayment. So 2030 is when those bonds are going to be fully repaid. So there is a schedule for those repayments because, again, when we're selling those bonds, we are stating a specific time period for a specific percentage. Therefore, they have to be repaid according to that table over time. So there's really no way to restructure those bonds. But again, in the near future, those bonds are going to be fully repaid. We are looking at 2015, those bonds being issued. So with that 15-year time period, we're coming up very, very soon on those bonds. Yes, and it's paid off by the taxes, local taxes. You can, when you look at your property tax bill, you can see a primary and a secondary tax on there, and you can look at that secondary tax rate for that. All right, and what happens to the budget and overall savings projections if no viable repurposing options for the campuses are found? Again, that's why there is that conservative look at only 70% savings. So if we're not repurposing, we're not renting, the property in any way, shape, or form, then it would continue to have that cost year after year, that 70% cost at that point. That is really truly not an option because repurposing is going to be necessary, and that phase 2 that Mr. Dolzal has spoken about, that has to be put in place, and whether it be plans, some of the initial ideas that we spoke about, that's why it's important to bring together some of our stakeholders to put those plans in place.
Okay, this one is what will happen to the surge of kiddos with ECS programs? So like all of our programs, we staff based off of the number of students. So if a bunch of students enroll into ECS, then we will make sure that we have additional staff members for the ECS programs.
This one I think kind of flows along with what Dr. Pletnick had just said, but are there other creative solutions or community partnerships you could explore to utilize the campuses in a way that benefits the district and community while offsetting costs? That again is kind of the entire purpose of moving into the phase 2. Once we know what campuses that we have to look at, again, why we would access the city planners for Phoenix and Scottsdale, Chamber of Commerce, talked with Mr. Feld, it's not a president, but the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, getting them involved, giving other people, as we've said here, that are experts around. Again, we have some ideas about potentially bringing back our level D special ed kids, and running a program here instead of outsourcing and sending the kids other places and paying for that. It's quite expensive if we can bring them back again. So there's a two-prong. With open campuses, can we have and realize additional savings, and what revenue streams can we start creating with that? So there again would be the community group that Dr. Pletnick talked about, along with those city people that would be critical in getting involved in that.
There were a few questions, and several speakers spoke about it tonight, about the facilities here on Lone Mountain, the gym, the parking, things like that, and was that taken into consideration? Yes, all those things were looked at, and so there is an inherent risk of whatever school you close. Every school had pros and cons, and so we looked at all those. There's some positive things about Lone Mountain. There's some things that make it less of a risk if we close it. Same with Desert Willow. So all those things were taken into consideration. Ultimately, a big driving factor is schools that are pulling in open enrollment because of a specialized program, because of that border thing. That was weighed as a heavier factor within that committee's work than facility size, things like that. There's been a few questions as far as health and safety at Desert Willows. Can they hold that capacity of Lone Mountain coming over? I want to say at the peak, Lone Mountain had 775 students at it, or Desert Willow at its peak had about 775 students. So the schools are built for those sizes. Health and safety, we do have health and safety reports and inspections, and the fire marshal that comes through every year with things like that. And so those do always meet those things, and that school was built to the standards of what was set for schools buildings at that time.
Going back to the question before, I just want to make sure I understand. So you guys are looking at $800,000 plus amount of money, but it hasn't been fully vetted what other revenue sources for the closed location. Because I just don't understand why you wouldn't have comprehensive understanding of potential revenue streams if you want to come in by only looking at 2 locations and the rest of the other table. Or more, right? Because you're saying, like, what else can you use this space for? Because, but you don't know yet what those revenue streams and how much money past $800K you will be thinking.
Well, yeah, we are projecting the savings from moving the students, instructionally becoming more efficient with,
No, I understand that part, but my question though is, what you're potentially looking at additional revenue opportunity for use cases for the abandoned sites, right? Ones that you're closing. But it doesn't seem like there's formalized information or data or estimates of additional money that we would be getting for using these sites.
Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of interpret a little bit and correct me if I'm wrong. So have we looked at what site potentially would make the most revenue over another site? Could this school make more revenue over another school if that were the site? So part of that is part of phase 2. We have ideas, we have things that we've looked at, conversations we've had, but we didn't go down the road of, we made a predetermination that it's gonna be this school, we're turning it into this. Simply doing that would have made a predetermination and not had the community input or feedback. So,
budget ideas for the next 12 months, if not 5 years. So where is the plan here? Because I really am, I personally don't understand how you guys are going to do less than 40 days, reallocate your teachers, transfer everybody, and then move into phase 2 with trying to understand how much money or revenue that you could be getting in addition to. That to me would be a very big piece of the puzzle.
Well, and what we're looking at, we are funded on a one-year basis, which Patty did say, so we have to look at that, but looking at future where we can save and so forth, that is part of that phase 2 and expanding upon those ideas. The very first thing is the cost-cutting measures, because if we don't cut those costs, we're going to be running negative within our maintenance operations. So that's why looking at the various options, beginning to explore the various options, having those talks, and then the importance of beginning, as Mr. Dolezal said, that phase 2 of looking at what options we are going to put in those facilities is going to be. So, but
Looked out prior to everyone making the decision of which locations to close. Like get a comprehensive picture of your cost-saving measures as well as what revenue opportunities you possibly draw from those locations.
The couple things. One, we're going to honor the people that have turned these in and go to them. No, and I get it, and I want to come and maybe it's a conversation that we have afterwards, or we get together or something like that. But again, I also know on one hand, I believe, I guess I will not say I know, I believe that us having all of those things lined up, we would be getting yelled at for that in terms of already having all these things pre-done and that. We don't know what we are going to have as far as assets go because a decision has not been made in order to move forward and what we can repurpose and what we can't. Already having that done, now again, do we have ideas? Yes, we've talked about some of those different things. But again, I don't believe we as a leadership group believe that we have all the right answers. I think there's talent in this room. I think there's talent across the district and in our community. So once we know what it is that we have to repurpose and where those potentials might lie, that's when we need to go in and start exploring, okay, here are some ideas. What are those other ones? Does the city of Phoenix, who has said they've kind of run out of money for community centers, is this an option that they might want to explore? But again, in terms of until a decision is made, we may or may not have an asset in the city of Phoenix to actually run down that with.
Sounds like you're closing the school and then you're going to do the research afterwards.
and part of it is revenue is not guaranteed. Cost savings aren't guaranteed when we close schools, and so we can't necessarily rely on that we are going to get guaranteed revenue by whatever we do with it. Whatever choices we are making, it's not like we're looking to repurpose the schools to be repurposed for August of 2025. We're going to want to make sure that we do a thorough process and look at all options with it. So, question, has it been evaluated which scenario causes more student and families to leave, separating the campus of Lone Mountain and removing an entire culture versus moving an entire Spanish immersion? So that, again, were conversations that took place within the committee. We know that there's an inherent risk, whatever way we do, moving Desert Willow Hill here, or splitting Lone Mountain or moving Lone Mountain. We know that there's an inherent risk. Based off the work of the committee and the recommendation, it was recommended that there was less of a risk splitting Lone Mountain, and that was what the focus group put forward to the governing board when we presented. Have you considered centralizing the preschool program again to cut costs? If so, would this result in significant savings? We've had conversations about one of the repurposing is, do you have a centralized preschool program? Do you have a 2-year-old's classrooms there? How do we expand that in one place and after-school programs? Because our ECS preschool program is a revenue stream, something that we can capture and expand on. So there's been conversations about that. Again, no decision has been made because part of it is doing the research, not rushing into committing the campus to something when we can maximize the revenue streams with it. James, I think I might have to have you clarify this afterwards, but you had asked about what are the options for accommodating Title IV students? Could this potentially be relocated to the district office campus? So, no, Title IX is completely different there. Title I students? Okay, the private placement, it's level D private placement. Yeah, so those are the conversations, and we've had conversations with some of those private placement schools of what does it look like servicing those kids here on our campuses on whatever facility that may be. So those conversations have started.
Could I ask one clarifying question, sorry, back to the focus group discussion regarding the movement of Desert Willow to, was that data driven or was that opinion in that discussion that was determining that there would be more, it would be riskier, you didn't mention that, and what was the data, how would that come to determination?
No, so is data looking at trends of the of those schools, future trends of the schools, open enrollment, where those families are going from? One of the questions here is that 51% of the students come from outside of Lone Mountain, but Lone Mountain also has a high number of students that leave Lone Mountain to go to another site. So those are all the factors that we'll look at, and so it's kind of a qualitative and quantitative approach with it. Yeah.
Next question is, how long is the longest expected bus ride? And longest expected bus ride, if we're looking at, based upon what schools are chosen to close, longest expected bus rides, we're looking at, our Rio Verde kids who have long bus rides right now. So those who are going to Desert Sun, and the difference would be going those routes from Desert Sun to Horseshoe Trails. So that is something that Ms. Nelson, our transportation director, and I will work on when we look at any kind of potential school closings and movement of the transportation. So that's going to be very dependent upon, again, what is the choice of potential school closures, but then it's going to be, just like we do every year, mapping out the bus routes. And Ms. Nelson, she works with a specialized program to figure out where stops are and how efficient each bus route can run. So the next question I have is, if special programs were removed from each school, how do you calculate whether the campus would become financially viable? That's kind of a difficult question in respect to if special programs were removed. For example, we discussed the Mandarin program with Mandarin leaving Horseshoe Trails and what impact that had on that campus. So that would truly, it would depend. It depends upon the individual's choice of how they feel about that particular program, how strongly they feel about that program. So to estimate that would be difficult, but part of that 12.5% loss of students, that would kind of go into that consideration. Next, what are the calculations for maintenance operations expenses on each campuses for 1, 3, 5 years? Like Dr. Jensen said, that's kind of a difficult question. If we look at our maintenance operation budgets for the previous 5 years, we've ranged from 32.1 to 32.9 million. Again, when we're looking at that, part of that has been moving some of the capital funds over to our maintenance operations, which means covering if we were short in some years. So the expectations for maintenance operations is set year to year. And part of the reason for that is because we don't know our funding until the legislature sets the budget each year. So we can kind of forecast a year out, but we kind of have an idea also by looking at our enrollment from year to year to year, what it's going to look like. Again, we've discussed the projections of our enrollment and the decrease in our enrollment in that period of time. So that's usually handled yearly in order to kind of look at the budget on that. But what we do, again, is we look at that enrollment and again, when we look at the demographer's report, we saw enrollment going all the way out to 2034 to give us a good idea of what direction our district is heading. Next one is, where is the profit and loss for the district and district office employees? Okay, so essentially you're looking for income statement for that. So if you actually look at our AFR, our annual financial report, which was filed in October, what you'll see on that annual financial report is our revenues and all of our expenditures. The nice part of that is it also breaks down each individual area of spending, such as general administration. So you can see how much we spent out of our budget in those particular areas. The other nice thing is the Auditor General. So we're audited every year, but also the Auditor General takes our annual financial reports and they audit them as well at the state level. And when we look at that, they produce, and I just got done dealing in December with the Auditor General for the upcoming report that should hopefully be published in a month or two. But what they do is they publish a report and it shows our spending as a district. And with our spending, it compares us to the state, but also puts us in peer groups. So districts like our district, and they compare where we are at versus the other districts in the state and where our spending's at. And again, anybody can go onto the Auditor General's, if you type Auditor General, Cave Creek Unified School District, and just put 2023, that's the last report. You can go and see the report and see how we compare against our peers. And our district, if the question really is for the administrative spending, because that was brought up a couple of times tonight, we are actually lower than our peers and lower than the state average in administration spending. So on the Auditor General site, you'll see it listed as comparable on that. So it will break down the total per student that we are spending. And also it'll have how many administrators we have per student on here, again, which is lower than our peer groups at this point. And the other thing I say at this point, because currently as I think Dr. Jensen or Mr. Strolzall mentioned, there's multiple positions that we chose not to fill, and that's one of the big pieces and one pushes that we've had this year is to minimize as much M&O expense as we possibly can.
Couple questions. When and how will we be informed what school will become our new home school with transportation? And so once the board makes a decision on January 28th, that they make a decision, we'll begin the notification process that week, later that week, early next week, to what is your new zone school. If you are zoned for that school, transportation will be provided. If you are open enrolling at a different school, similar to right now, if you choose to open enrolling, you are not providing transportation for open enrolling, and so that would continue there. Will we kind of going off Dr. Pletnick's, will there be elimination to district office employees? We had to cut about $2 million from our budget last year, and we eliminated a position in my department. Our grounds and maintenance consolidated and eliminated probably 3 or 4 different positions there. Dr. Jensen's department is down to a couple positions. Our SPED department is down a couple positions, and transportation has removed some positions as well. So we have removed positions all across there. And again, there's still some essential things that have to be done. So there's some essential positions that have to remain. Could there be cuts in other positions? Absolutely. That would be something that would need to be looked at. However, the other thing we have to look at is where do those requirements of that position, where does that fall on? Does that fall on another director? Does that fall on an administrator? Does that fall on a teacher leader, possibly, things like that? So those are all things that have to be taken into consideration. Has a study been determined if the open enrollment for Desert Willow is because of this? Has a study been determined if the open enrollment for Desert Willow is because of the Spanish immersion program and not due to its location? If this has been done, is the data available to evaluate this question? And I want to say we have about 87 kids that open enroll at Desert Willow. The vast majority, I don't have the specific numbers, but the vast majority are there for the Spanish immersion program. That program does not have any K-2 English only side because the vast majority of our families are choosing that Spanish program side to it.
Next question is, have you considered financial contributions from campus PTOs, such as funds allocated towards teacher salaries, calculations when determining which school to be recommended for closure? When you look at the total expenditures from the governing board meeting, that would include any kind of donations, that could include PTO donations in expenditures. So that piece was used within that calculation. Now moving forward, how does PTO help with salaries and so forth? We do have multiple schools that do use PTO assistance for certain positions on campus. And so that has historically happened within this district, is where PTOs have helped funded like lunch aids and so forth, above and beyond what we do allocate for those schools. Now, as for a long-term solution, that would be difficult because, again, that funding would not be guaranteed. Dr. Hendrickson can get into what any kind of human resource ramifications would be with such a limited contract, but I would say that's the way PTOs are taken into consideration. What's the anticipated cost to prepare the other 3 elementaries for these proposed changes? The costs, there will be costs associated with it. The exact cost we don't know, depending upon how many campuses we close. If say it's one campus, if our current staffing, like our maintenance staff, can handle the movement, then there would be no additional cost unless we needed to pay overtime for those individuals. If 2 campuses close, we may still be able to, again, based upon where the shifts of enrollment are, cover that internally. I can tell you other districts also have done things like hire movers and moving companies, and it's cost them a few $1,000s to get everything moved. They also provided, like Paradise Valley, provided assistance to their teachers in moving. We're also talking about providing providing a stipend to our teachers for the time if a school does close, to pack up their classroom. So that would be a cost associated with it as well. The question goes with this: can the full report, including findings from the focus group, be made available? And how much do the demographers cost the district? There is a website up that covers school closures, as well as demographer reports. As for how much the services of the demographer cost, I'm going to be honest with you, I'd have to find the contract for them and what services they fully provide us. Applied Economics is the company that we do use for that. And there are multiple services that they do. They do our demographer report, our boundary maps, the official drawings of our boundary maps, if the boundary maps have to be redone as well.
Okay. The board has not voted yet for anything. Why are students already flagged in power schools? They shouldn't be, so I'm not sure who is. I just looked up Gwendolyn, my child, who will be affected by this move, and she's located in Little Mountain. So I'm not sure. I'm happy to look at you or talk with you later to show me what you're meaning, but students have not been flagged in there yet. As far as I mean, nobody knows yet how this is gonna work out, so we haven't moved.
I mean, the only current flags we have are different identifications that we need in terms of, they might be 504 special ed or gifted, or if there's a medical alert, those types of flags are in there. But yeah, I would be curious to see what that's asking.
Okay, next, when was the last central plant replaced for each campus? What is the life cycle of those units, and how does this factor into the long-term planning? And that goes into what are the major expenses you are forecasting from each campus. One of the things that we looked at, we hired a company, FMG, to come in and look at all of our spaces and examine not only the square footage and draw out the square footage, but what they do is they project out the expected costs for each campus year by year at each campus. So they look at things like paint, they look at floors, they look at how long the roofs are going to last, 8 air conditioning units. So we did bring that company in for a breakdown of each and every campus, and they broke down that information of how much each campus would cost year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4 for those replacements. So that information was used during the focus group session. I believe FMG actually came in to speak to the group and discuss those. And that's on the website. So you can find that information on the website.
Can Spanish immersion and other specialized programs be relocated? Yes. So the part 2 was if not, but yes, we can relocate specialized programs. Okay, my last one.
And this is one with James, and I think we discussed this earlier. James, can we get the funding per pupil at each school without the financial implications of special education being included from a revenue and expense perspective? Yeah, I can pull that out for you. And if you want to talk about that again individually, I know we discussed it a little bit earlier, but I can certainly pull those numbers out again, and we can look at that. It's a spreadsheet like we talked about.
Yeah.
Okay, the last one I have is from Katie, and she left, so I'll answer for everyone else. Will the soon-to-be 6th graders be prepared for middle school? Or how will the soon-to-be 6th graders be prepared for middle school? So I discussed already a little bit about that, but specifically, we're going to plan to do all of the same things that we typically do for our transitioning kids into 7th grade, which would include the Stinger Day, t-shirts, the parent night for parents to go over to the middle school to preview it, registration where the counselors come over here and work with the kids, an end-of-year social event. Mr. Boggs did make a joke that there might not be enough wall space around the cafeteria for the dance because they all just like to stand on the side and watch each other, but we would have some sort of a social event as well to keep it fun and positive for them as well. And yes, bringing them up to tour for that Stinger Success, or Stinger Day, I think is what we call it. And then we'd also have our trail days in the summer, which would be everybody involved. We've also spoken with the principals about making sure that our 5th graders, if this happens, that our 5th graders would be able to experience what our 6th graders typically do for end of year, or even just their last year experiences. So, example, one of our schools does a flash mob in the fall. They do their flash mob for the 5th graders in the spring to make sure that their students get that opportunity. Other examples like that, yearbook dedication pages. We make sure the 5th and 6th graders would get an opportunity to have a yearbook dedication page. Little things like that we sometimes slip by but are important.
That appears to be the end of the questions and concludes this evening. I'd like to remind everyone that Monday, January 13th, there is a public meeting at the Fine Arts Center. Doors will open at 5:30 and requests to speak must be turned in prior to 6 o'clock start time. This public meeting is where the board will be up and leading that group and listening again to public comments on potential closures, boundary changes, and grade configurations. On January 28th, at the Governing Board Business Meeting, the board will again hear public comments, and administration will bring a final recommendation for the board to take action regarding school closures, boundary adjustments, and grade configurations for the 25-26 school year. And finally, we would like to thank everyone who came tonight, allowed us to answer questions, listen to your comments. We appreciate you. We thank you. Have a very good evening.